And we're live from OEGlobal in Delft in the Netherlands, connecting to find out what's happening at that conference. Folks on site, would you introduce yourselves real quick?
Yeah, hi. My name is Oliver. I work for OEGlobal, a company in Norway, and you may know H5P, which is software that you can use to create interactive content, and which is mainly used for educational purposes. And it's open source, and we support the idea of open education, and I guess that's why we got an award yesterday. So that's why I'm here, and I'm, yeah, maybe you can next.
Yeah, and I'm Rajiv Jhangiani. I'm a psychology instructor and supporting open education at Kwantlen Polytechnic University in British Columbia, Canada. And certainly here for my institution, but also just working with a lot of the other people in the movement, from Creative Commons to BC Campus and others.
Just a quick drop in from me. Hi, I'm Christian. I'm the on-site buddy for today's session, and I'll move out of the frame as quickly as I came in.
Let's introduce our virtual folks from points around the globe. Christina, would you say hi?
Yes, hi. I'm Christina Hendricks. I'm calling in from Vancouver, British Columbia in Canada, where I teach philosophy and I do open education advocacy stuff.
Great, welcome. Greg?
Hi, I'm Greg Dillon. I'm an instructional technologist in the Boston area, and I'm really happy to be here with you guys to hear about the conference.
Jess, you want to say hi?
Hi, I'm Jess. I'm calling in from Toronto. I'm with OEGlobal University, the Inclusive Design Research Center.
Maha?
I'm Maha Bedi from the American University in Cairo, here in Cairo, Egypt.
Great, welcome. Nadine?
Hi guys, I'm connecting also from Cairo. I work at the Center for Learning and Teaching at AUC with Maha.
Nate?
Hi, I'm Nate Angel, calling in from Portland, Oregon in the United States, and I work with Hypothesis, the nonprofit open source organization that supports annotation technologies.
Thanks. Robin?
Hi, I am Robin DeRosa. I am in New Hampshire right now in the United States. I teach at Plymouth State University running an interdisciplinary studies program. And it was a really long, isolating week. And so to see you guys all here, I like getting teary. What a nice group. It's awesome.
You haven't seen it all yet. We were actually, it's kind of like a family gathering here for virtually connecting folks. Let me show you something. Want to come into frame just for a second? Ellen, you're missing too.
Hi, Robin.
Hi. And I'm giving stickers.
That's wonderful. Terry, say hi.
Hi, I'm Terry Green. I'm a program manager at eCampus Ontario. Thanks for having me.
Wonderful. It's great to have the virtual campfire together. Folks at the conference, tell us a little bit about what you're learning.
We go first. Well, the most obvious thing that I learned yesterday, for me at least, is that people are really friendly around here. So I've never experienced a talk where people were so well, really nice to each other and just pointing out what was good and what might be better, but in a really, really polite way and constructive way. So that's what I took along from yesterday.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's been really fascinating for me. This is the second time I've been at OEGlobal, and for me, this is really far and away my favorite open education conference, partly because it really has representation from across the world. It's not, it can't always be fantastic, but it has better global representation than most other open ed conferences I've seen. But also the conversations are taking place at different levels about sort of recommendations within UNESCO, down to the weeds in terms of practical strategies that educators are deploying, talking very much about the intersections of open education and open research today, and deliberate spaces for very critical conversation so we can be self-reflective, like we just finished the last hour, for example. So for me, this is a real treat to be here. And even though we're talking about openness, I think even one of the keynotes, it was quite interesting that many people are focused on the goals they want to achieve, and sometimes the approach is pragmatic, and so even the approach may not actually involve OER particularly, as long as the goals that are being served are the goals that, in fact, the open ed movement holds. So it's quite interesting in that sense.
Nothing to add right now, but I agree.
But I mean, these connections are phenomenal. I was telling Oliver yesterday, when I met him, just as he was receiving the award, I came up to him and I said, "You have no idea how excited I am to meet you because of the work of H5P. I have educators come to the open movement in the British Columbia context just because H5P is so incredible. So they're thinking about the pedagogical possibilities. So there's a lot of fanboying and fangirling going on around, definitely."
Yeah, and it feels strange for me, so because I have a glimpse of how celebrities might feel. I'm not comfortable with it, but yeah, I have to lose it.
Yes, definitely.
Well, and so I don't want to drive the conversation. I want all of our virtual participants to just jump in with questions. But Rajiv and Robin, I know that you've got a new project out that talks about some of those goals of open education, which I shamefacedly admit I was reading quickly right before we set up the Hangout. So if you'd like to say a little more about that particular project, that might be a good jumping off point.
I'm going to invite Robin to kick this off, really.
Well, sure, I can kick it off by saying when you are a collaborator of Rajiv's, there's a new project every couple of weeks in your inbox. Like, I have an inspiration and I need to chat with you tonight. And they're all so interesting. I feel so blessed. So Rajiv had this idea that, well, I think both he and I do a lot of talking at institutions to people who are new to open. And it's pretty easy to get your head around the adoption of an OER textbook. But I think Rajiv and I both spend a lot of time talking about the effects on the classroom, you know, just what it feels like to be working in the open with colleagues, but also particularly with students, and have had such sort of thrill and joy in that, even aside from all of the social justice pieces that are really the drivers for us. So we were interested in sharing examples, and I think a lot of us who do this faculty development work, we continually recycle the same examples. They're wonderful, they're amazing, but there's also like lots of people in places where, you know, their voices aren't necessarily out on the faculty development circuit, so to speak. And we wanted to make a space where people could more easily share their examples of working in the open, particularly with students. And I just want to give a big shout out to Steele Wagstaff, because sort of Rajiv and I conceived of the space and knew that we wanted it to be participatory, but Steele is really kind of like the brains behind the actual site in terms of making a nice, easy pipeline for people to get things posted without a lot of, I don't want to say there's not editorial oversight in the sense that we pay attention to what's going in there, and we want it to be well formatted and be accessible and be well tagged and have some good metadata. But we also just want people to we want the site to be emergent, and Steele built us some back end that makes it easy for users to really get in there and shape the site. So I'm excited about it. And there's every single person that I can see in all of, you know, the string here, and then live in Delft. I am waiting for you to send us a little snippet. And what I'm really hoping is that the site will be less of a broadcast site. Like, you know, I worked for, you know, 7 weeks on this absolutely perfect, you know, submission for the Open Pedagogy Notebook. I want it to be more like, I did this cool thing. I'm not going to stress too much about sharing it. I'm just going to give you some of the pieces with maybe a paragraph narrative. So people shouldn't feel like they have to spend a lot of time dressing it up for the site. We really want to see what your work looks like in practice. So it shouldn't create another layer of labor for you to submit something. At least that's my hope.
Yeah, and in fact, so I should add to that by saying, for those of you who haven't seen it, the URL for the website, which is called the Open Pedagogy Notebook, the URL is openpedagogy.org. And really, I think, much like Robin is saying, when we talk to faculty are often really excited by the idea of open pedagogy. But I think it's hard sometimes to understand what that looks like in practice, especially across diverse contexts, maybe your discipline or your kind of institution. But also, like Robin is saying, I think there's this lovely vulnerability of working in open, and so it is a space where you can browse examples, but we're really very much wanting this to be a space for the community. So not just fully classroom tested practices, but even sort of stubs of ideas that others can build on and polish. Because I mean, that is part of what this is all about, is exploring that. Working in the open can be terrifying and it can be liberating, and it's a very vulnerable space. But providing at least a space for that, and it's been fun because last week at Creative Commons Global, I led an open pedagogy workshop where people were already sort of redesigning things or designing projects in the room, and at the end, you invited everyone to contribute. And one of the immediate things that came out, this is just 2 weeks after we've launched the site, is there were requests for being able to submit ideas in a different language other than English, to be able to translate some of the existing submissions. And I love this, right? Because we immediately had a conversation about it, and Steele, the wizard, again, jumping with ideas and solutions that I'm sure we will be able to implement, as soon as we can technically manage it. But it's clear that the response from the community, to me, suggests that there was a need for this. And we've had, since we've launched it, a few submissions that have come in that have already been by the community. So that's been, I think, a really nice start.
And just a quick note from me. Sorry, I'm jumping in again. What I found really useful, apart from everything you've just described, is whenever somebody asks you what is open pedagogy, what is OER, and I always struggle to find that definition, and I now have a great resource to forward them, right? This is one of those new hubs that I can use and share practice, and even I think it's the About section, the post, that's like, thank you just for that. If it were only for that, huge thanks for giving us resources that we can forward to others to basically share your work and what you've been doing there.
And we recycled that piece from an open textbook that Rebus just won that award for, which is about making open textbooks with students. So, we had openly licensed it there. And my friends, it is the beauty of the open license, right? Move your work from one place to the other, get double the credit, reach different audiences. It's beautiful, right? But honestly, that piece had been out for a while in Rebus, and I think had reached a very certain kind of group of readers. And it was amazing to me to put it into another context and to realize that it was fresh and new for a lot of people, because, your work is not just about your work is about its reception. And so when you share with the open license and you move things into different contexts, like that really is actually a service to the community and to the field. You don't need to write something new every time to actually make new impact. And that's been kind of interesting to me. And, at first I sort of think I had a little bit of shame about like moving things from one context to another, until I realized this was one of the beauties of the license, is that context shapes meaning. And when you move things into different contexts, they have the power to do different kinds of things. So it's been amazing to watch that piece have a little bit of a resurgence in the new in the new place.
Greg had a question in the chat, and I wonder if you want to pose it to the group.
Sure, I'll jump in. I was wondering, this is a fantastic idea. I was also looking at the website before the session, and it's really exciting. I was wondering how receptive faculty at your individual institutions are to open pedagogy.
Not sure if you want me to lead that off, but I can. Certainly my institution is interesting because it's a teaching, it's focused on teaching, not research, even though there's a fair bit of research that does take place. And so people are hired, promoted, and really teaching is the basis for all of that. So there's a lot of interest in teaching innovation in that context. And we are also an open access institution. So we're very focused on access and serving underserved populations. So for me, it's interesting. It feels like there are sort of overlapping groups over here. I feel some people come into the open movement at my institution primarily because the social justice piece really resonates with them. When they start to understand the reality of today's students, when they start to strip away all of the assumptions about access and affordability, food insecurity, all of these things. But there is another group that for whom, this is interesting, but it's not going to do it for them. And it's the pedagogy that brings them in. And so in a sense, they, as in fact, David Wiley has even said, they will come for the cost savings, but they will stay for the pedagogy. And of course, there are many who are interested in both. So, but at the same time, I find that it's excitement at a theoretical level. But then when it comes to, all right, how do I do this in my context? I mean, I can point them to, the Wiki Education Foundation if they're interested in doing those kinds of projects. But I think there's a dearth of, practical how to, rubrics, this, that, very practically. How can you deploy this? What are the issues you should think about? So I think that's the need. And so I found more success working in small groups of sort of faculty learning communities where we really dig deep into open pedagogy, experimenting, and sort of that way enabling them to really experiment and showcase those. But I found that it's a wonderful way to widen the doorway or the gateway for people to sort of enter the open movement. People for whom, the issue of cost of books is often one of the hallmarks of advocacy, but for whom that doesn't resonate. And that's cool because I think there's far too much lip service that's paid to the 5-hour permissions. And the idea of open pedagogy is, yes, working with students, but what would happen if we actually thought about the affordances of open in terms of teaching and learning, and not just about the access implications, but about agency and giving students a whole lot more agency in the context of their education. So for me, it's very practical.
And I just wanted to jump in real quick on that. And first of all, say I just got dinged that there was a new submission to the Open Pedagogy Notebook as this was happening. So I'm looking at all you guys like, who's typing? Who did that? But anyway, Rajiv has written about this, I think, more effectively than I'll say it right now. But the sort of OER as a gateway to open pedagogy, or like even worse, the gateway drug to open pedagogy, has not been my experience in doing faculty development. I think that's reversed. I've found that faculty are much more interested in the effects on learning than they are in anything related to any advocacy around low-cost textbooks. So to come in through the gateway of pedagogy, I think has been more effective. And also, I think more for me, that gateway of social justice and how that's linked up to teaching and learning has been a really effective way to talk to faculty. But I also wanted to add, and this always gets, I think, a lot of nods from folks like you guys who are leaders in open, is that it's what I've been started calling the cookie metaphor, which is I walk around my own institution a lot like, hi, I have this cookie. Can I give it to you? Like, can I give you this cookie? And it's like, damn, your cookie. But we'd like to bring in Rajiv Jhangiani because he has a cookie we'd like, and I kind of have to pretend that I don't really know Rajiv when he's on my campus, like, oh, that guy's smart. We should do what he says. And then Rajiv will invite me over to Vancouver and I will give my cookies out. Yeah. And actually, I think that's a, profit in your own land kind of thing is an issue that we all struggle with. But I actually think that's a real problem about education in general right now, is this sort of like outsourcing and this sense of like, I can buy it better somewhere else than I can grow it here myself. And one of my goals in thinking about moving from faculty to administration is in trying to build ecosystems that are more about growth of community. And I love going out and doing keynotes and faculty development at other places. God knows, why wouldn't you love it? It's the easiest job in the world, right? Because you get to leave before everybody has to work. But honestly, really what I like to do most is lift up the people who are already doing that good work in the institutions and to train administrators to listen better to what's going on their own institutions. And I'm curious about what the links are between devaluing the people in our own spaces and, you know, open. Like there's something about those, like we should care about this as open pedagogues. I think it matters. It matters who we're listening to and what role we think our own institutions, particularly public institutions, play in growing our approach to teaching and learning. So just want to put that out there.
Rasha, I'm seeing all the nodding going on in the text chat. And, and this is such a huge issue. And one of the things that I caught on to what you were saying, though, is you talked about training administrators to listen. Is that, like, how do you do that?
Is that possible?
I'll tell you when I find out. No, I think honestly, there's something to be said for persistence, which is hard because when we don't feel aligned with institutions, sometimes we try to leave them. And that's been something that I've wrestled with a lot. But I also know that like things happen so glacially sometimes. So when you go out on a keynote circuit, you see this massive like paradigm shift happen before your eyes, and it's kind of remarkable. But the work of changing institutions doesn't look like that. So I think especially for those of us who are used to conferencing and keynoting, you get kind of a dissociated effect because you see that paradigm shift and then you're like, why can't we do work that matches our paradigms? But work doesn't work like that. So I think being much more patient with the pace of institutions and being much more appreciative of small change is helping me a little bit. This is the first year in my own institution. I've been working really hard on open since 2014. And this is the first year in my own institution that I'm seeing sprouts coming up. And that's not true. We have a big open initiative, but in terms of like really feeling that community movement, that took a lot of years, you know, and that's, I think when we say we plant seeds, but we really don't mean that we're patient enough to watch that, but we should probably be a little more patient about that. Institutional change is worth it. You know, individual paradigm shift is one thing, but changing institutions, in my opinion, I'm really aligned with the idea that public institutions matter. And if it takes longer to shift them, it's still worth it, I think.
Yeah, I'm not sure if others want to jump in over here. I mean, I'm sort of almost eternally an optimist over here. I feel like a few years ago, there was no such thing as an OER librarian. And now that is a thing that is at more than one institution. So I'm certainly seeing practically, you know, the ability to point to language in almost any institution's strategic planning documents. I mean, that's the nice thing about openness is if there's language in there about student success or student access or anything like this or outcomes, you can draw direct lines to open educational practices and the ramifications of those in some sense. So I think making the case in the way that is the right message for the right ears, but also very much celebrating what other institutions are doing, using each other as models. So I think I experience exactly the same problem as you as the internal person, you get discounted very easily. But at the same time, I think pointing to tangible examples of what is being done in different contexts is helpful because nobody wants to be the first. Mm-hmm. But at the same time, aligning with your language that says you ought to do this, the injunctive norms, with what people are actually doing at your institution. So you may not know this, but at Plymouth State University, I can point to a bunch of people who are practicing open pedagogy, and in the room, people are like, "Oh, really?" And this is the person who's the expert in the room. Oh, really? Fantastic! It's remarkable to look at the dynamic. And so I think sometimes there's this weird dynamic where you need the internal and the external, especially if the external provides examples of who has already broken that barrier, so you don't have to be the first. But you do have concrete examples. You want to make sure what makes it sustainable is the community that will spring up. And so you really need, planting those seeds, it does take time, but I'm furiously optimistic about the potential of this work.
Yeah, I can only agree, because I think people might be feared to do something new. And as I see, okay, there are those people I know, they are professors and stuff, they are well-known, people with great reputation, and I think they're more willing to do this. So yeah, I totally agree.
So I want to be mindful of time. As many of you know, I will just keep talking. So we can stay as long as people have time, but I know that we are coming up on 10:30, and that may have been all the time that people blocked out. I don't know what your schedule is on site, so I just want to note that real quickly and say that if anybody does want to get a thought in before they have to run, they should do so. And if not, we can just keep going.
I think Rajiv wants to keep going, doesn't he?
I'm happy to keep going.
I mean, we just we basically talked all of during our coffee break, basically, and you might have heard that gong 5 minutes ago online. That basically signaled us to go back to our sessions, but I can only speak for myself, and I'm not going to attend another session today. I think, at least not a workshop or something. But maybe one last round of questions, and then we'll wrap it up. Is that okay for you? Okay, so
can I jump in?
That degree, as I learned in Canadians.
The OER degree, yeah, it's interesting. Although I certainly want to, I want to add at least one question, intentionally to make sure because it's interesting. I mean, if I can just pause from the OER question for a minute, because for me, there's so much fascinating stuff happening with some of the. And Nate is here from Hypothesis, and your company is a beautiful example of this as well, where open source technologies and the communities that surround those are really providing incredible gifts to open education, a way that I think connects very much with open pedagogy. And so, before we talk about sort of OER degrees, and I keep rambling, I really want to sort of ask you guys, was this to what degree is this sort of intentional? How do you think about the excitement around open pedagogy? Education communities seem to be really excited about your projects, and perhaps even maybe a taste of what's coming down the pipeline, use cases that you might have dreamed of, that perhaps this audience would be the right audience to sort of run with these ideas.
And maybe I just, I would think of H5P. Good way to bring people to being open if they just get a tool that they like and use, and if that tool fosters openness, then they might become a little more open themselves. That's at least what I hope. I don't have any good examples of that, I think, but still hope it will lead to somewhere.
I want to encourage you to be revolutionary with H5P and encourage other authoring platforms to do what you all are doing. Like, I've just learned about H5P at the CC Global Summit, but your commitment to WCAG AA compliance, you're pushing forward on breaking down barriers literally for access is so much more impressive to me than what I'm hearing from WordPress about the Gutenberg authoring environment. Whenever you touch authoring, you have an opportunity. And I am hoping that you can encourage other people to take this stuff seriously as you are, and that this isn't just an add-on, this isn't just a secondary concern. This is the way that we actually change the internet and change the content on the internet and who has access to it. So thank you for that, and please continue.
Don't thank me, because it's really a community effort, and I empathized it yesterday. So it's there's Christian's joking all the time that I get the prize, but of course I didn't. And you didn't get the prize. The company that built a core team of H5P, but it's really a community effort. I emphasize that people are translating content types, they're creating content and sharing it with others. And for example, I don't think without this pool of H5P examples that people all around the world create, H5P wouldn't where it is today. So
I think the best example for that, I don't know if you mentioned it, but the best example for that is actually how you got to where you are now, right, with your job. So that might be an interesting story to wrap things up.
Well,
maybe.
the story, how did I get to H5P? I worked at the university in Lübeck in Germany, and we were creating online courses, and open online courses, by the way, really open online courses, openly licensed. And yeah, we were changing some tools, and we had to look at some tools, and we found H5P. And we fell in love with it, source, and we had a chat with all the people that I didn't know back then. And they were totally open. They really took some time and discussed things with us, and we said, okay, let's use H5P. And at some point in time, I was missing a feature in the interactive video. If you don't know, that's not important, but well, I have a background in IT, and so, okay, I know a little bit about coding. I should at least learn a little bit. And I tried, and it was pretty simple to add the feature that I was missing. And over time, it got more and more and more. And well, I didn't only create new features and fix bugs, but I showed H5P at conferences and at some workshops. And yeah, and that led to me joining OEGlobal because I was at our conference. I say our conference in September. We had a conference in Tromsø in Norway. Yeah, where I was asked if I would like to join. So my openness led to a new job, which is really cool. So.
I might add just one thing in there if I could. This is Nate from Hypothesis. And I think one of the really interesting things that's coming out of this is how smaller packages of capabilities like H5P can be now deployed in a much more loosely coupled way than in the kind of giant machines that we've had to experience with learning management systems. And so once again, another call out to Steele Wagstaff for the work that he's done, sewing together multiple systems and using Hypothesis in this case to display H5P capabilities on texts from a variety of different sources. And that just seems to me, that's one of the most exciting things. I know Jess would probably quake at the accessibility concerns of a whole bunch of loosely coupled applications working together. But as she points out, it's actually possible for these individual applications to raise the bar when it comes to things like accessibility. And so I really look forward to this future where we have a more loosely coupled technology infrastructure rather than what we've been dealing with up to now.
I think that presents some really interesting challenges from the administration and faculty development point of view, where, I mean, the impulse to get a big old Swiss Army knife that does everything but none of it real well does simplify an awful lot. And some people only need that Swiss Army knife, and that's kind of what you ought to give them. But remaining did I just invent open support in a model where you can, where people feel good about learning tools and owning projects, in the point where they can take these pieces that are more loosely connected, I think is it's a big challenge that we need a lot better understanding of.
Yeah, and if I may briefly add, I mean, I think with H5P, Hypothesis, Pressbooks, you name it. I mean, with open pedagogy even, I think the magic of all of this is really with open pedagogy and the empowerment of students is in the empowerment of faculty members to do what they would really like to do. Mm-hmm. And really when you witness the reinvigoration in terms of pedagogy, I mean, that for me, this is where the secret sauce is. It's not about CC, BY. I couldn't care less about what specific CC license somebody wants to adopt. I do care about somebody being passionate about education and bringing that into the classroom in a way that is mindful of privacy, accessibility, agency, and all of these issues. And so for me, whether it's H5P or whether it's involvement in a Z cred or Z degree program, it's really the empowerment part is for me where the sustainability piece comes in. And I will say that people like you move to your role with the librarian positions, and even people like Robin and the rest of you on the screen. We are agitating, and we have been agitating for quite some time. But it's the day is already upon us when we are slowly moving from being agitators to being in the decision maker's role. So I will only say that be ready for that moment and know what you want to do when you are given that platform. Because I think the voices at some point are just going to say, all right, you say you want to do this, what do you want to do? So I just want to say, be ready for that.
So like I said, I have time to keep talking, but that sounds like a closing statement.
So we might just gather all around the screen one last time then.
Yeah.
And we'll have a proper goodbye. Join us if you want to.
Why not? Oh, hold the hats.
Hey, Christian, will you tell us who's there live in the room? Looks like it's Zoom. I can't quite see it.
Well, Rajiv and Oliver, you've met. Then we have Jim Luke, aka the Comprof. Wave now. Thank you. Then we have Tobias Steiner, whose Twitter handle is somewhat unpronounceable. Apologies. No worries.
Just Toby.
And James,
come on. If you want to join us as well, we've had what some people would call a lurker with James Brunton, who wanted to find out how virtual connecting actually works on this end of the thing. That's it. A great session. So everybody on the virtual side, thank you for bearing with us for a whole 40-minute session by now.
It's lovely to see all of you.
Thank you.
Wonderful to see you. Thanks so much. I'm going to stop the broadcast now.